gentlemen, welcome to Nikon and tuning into this very special Nikon event. We've got a great day planned for you. Some really great conversation with some really great people to talk to you about the next chapter of Nikon Z, the Z6 II and the Z7 II. This is really exciting times. My name is Mike Corrado. I've been with Nikon for 36 years, celebrating it this October. And really excited to you because, again, every time there's a new product launch, there's some new technology to talk about. We've got some great guests to talk to you about what they've done with the cameras because they're the first kids on the block to get them, and first impressions of how they felt about the camera when they were using it. So we got some great guests with us today. We got some Nikon technology with us and two great photographers, starting with Charmy Pena. We've got Joe McNally and we've got Mark Cruz. All three people have some great feedback to give us on the camera today. But before we get going, Charmy, let's start with you. Thank you for joining us, all of you. But Charmy, for those people tuning in that may not know who you are, give us a little background on your wedding photography career.
I'm Charmy Pena. I'm based out of Princeton, New Jersey, and I have been photographing weddings for about 15 years. I focus mostly on really gigantic Indian weddings. Yeah, big Indian weddings. So not doing so many of those right now, but really having a great time doing big Indian ceremonies only right now, and it's really fun. They're really intimate and beautiful, and they're still very ornate and amazing.
We are so happy to have you here today, and thank you for bringing your talents and your insight. I've seen the pictures you've made for your assignment that we're going to talk about, and it's beautiful and brilliant. So thank you for being with us today. Now, of course, we're all excited, and this is even more special to me because for over 35 years, I've known this gentleman. With us today, the master of photography, flash, everything photography, Mr. Joe McNally is with us today. How you doing, Joe?
I'm doing well. Yes, it's been a long road, and dear friends have resulted, like you, Mike, and all my colleagues, in the photo industry. So it's been a wonderful, long, strange, and, great trip. I'm a freelance photographer. That's basically the summation of who I am. I'm a knockaround kind of photographer. I shoot assignments. So I've done politics and sports and news and science and technology and all manner of things. So on this particular instance, I shot some fashion, which was a lot of fun. So basically, I'm an all-purpose assignment photographer.
Well, again, thank you, Joe, for giving us your time and your insight today. And last but not least, and the gentleman that's going to kick this off, we've got Senior Product Manager Mark Cruz with us today. Mark and I have known each other for many years, and Mark is that kind of guy that immerses himself in every bit of technology. He's not just a great product manager, but he really digs into the manuals, understands the settings, and he's going to make a lot of technology sense to us today when we can't figure that out. So, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Mark Cruz. Mark, talk a little bit about your background at Nikon.
Thanks, Mike. My name is Mark Cruz, Senior Product Manager. I've been with the company Nikon overall for about 13 years, and my role here with Nikon USA is to help launch these new products, especially now that we have all these new Z products. There's a lot of new lenses, bodies that have been coming out in rapid succession, so I'm here to help launch those. I get to play with all these great toys all the time, see them before the general public does, and give input and things like that, take it from the public and really talk to the engineers and get into the tech. But I get to meet people like the artists like Charmy and Joe and even yourself. And so it's a great job. It's a great involvement with this great company, especially at this time with these exciting products.
Well, thank you for being with us today again, Mark, and I can't wait to hear more about what you have to say. So, I mean, just collectively in the audience, if you're tuning in, there's got to be a lot of excitement out there anytime you progress, and we're talking about the rapid expansion of the Z mirrorless system. I mean, it's moving hard and fast. We got more lenses coming out constantly. We've got these two new camera bodies coming out, so there's just a lot of excitement here. But Mark, let me start with you. Certainly every time there are new cameras that come out, there are improved features, improved technologies. Talk to us a little bit about what's happening, what's so cool about these new cameras.
Well, today especially is the day we've been waiting for a while, because this marks the entry into Generation 2, the next chapter of the Z Pro bodies. So we've announced today the release or the announcement of the launch of the Z6 II and Z7 II bodies. And it's really, for me, it's the perfect storm, because since July, we've announced another new full-frame body, the Z5. And between that, last month, we announced the 50mm 1.2 that everybody's been waiting for, as well as the 14 to 24 2.8. And we're really rounding out this system to make it a really professionally viable system, as you'll hear from Joe and Charmy from their experiences with the camera. But what's especially interesting about this time is that we've listened to a lot of the feedback from the customers in a short period of time. In 2 years, we've launched a brand new generation of this camera, and we'll talk about all the specs that you want to talk about with these cameras.
Yeah, no, let me turn to Joe and Charmy first. First you, Charmy, what Mark just said about these improvements or new technologies, what does that mean to you as a photographer?
I mean, for me, I'm always waiting for my cameras to grow because I'll grow into them and they become invisible to me. They just let me do my job, and then new technology appears and then I can do my job even better. And every time I think, all right, this is it. This is everything I've ever needed. I get something new that's like, no, this is going to make your life even easier. And so I think I have a couple of things on the Z6 II that I am super excited about.
Can't wait to talk about those. Joe, what Mark just said, you know, how does that make you feel? Talk about it within your career, how important the technology improvements are to you and the work that you do.
Yeah, I mean, when these kinds of days come along, and in this world of camera technology, they keep coming along. It's an amazing sort of progress that we've made. I always ask myself the question, how good is this going to get? I'm right there with Charmy, you know, what can I lay my hands on technology-wise that will make my job easier? Okay, the tech that's available now in these cameras is light years ahead of where, say, you and I started, Mike, you remember. And what it does really is enlarges the envelope of my imagination. It makes things possible that were not possible before. And it makes those things possible in a more simple way, if you know what I mean. Back in the day, you'd have to take wires and cords and heavy power packs and this and that and the other thing, and make a lot of guesswork at the situation you were confronting out in the field. Now these cameras eliminate a lot of that guesswork, and the responses of the cameras are becoming just as intuitive as the photographer behind it. So it's a really great partnership.
Beautiful. So as we grow, Mark Cruz, let me come back to you. We have Z7 II and Z6 II. What is that 2? What does that Roman numeral 2 mean?
Well, that Roman numeral 2 really means the second generation of these cameras. We turn the next chapter, as we said, on our website. And I'll tell you kind of the top 5 things that we've really taken to these cameras to take it to the next level. We talk about more a lot, and that's what you'll see with these cameras. We're giving you a lot more options, and we've listened to the community and what they need with this. So things like dual card slots we now have in both of these cameras. We have dual processors. So this is a first for our cameras to have 2 XSpeed 6 processors in it. And what really drives that is the need for the professional community to have a bigger buffer. We've had fast cards in the past, the XQD cards, but with the first generation, I think the professional community was demanding an even larger buffer. So with the dual XSpeed processors, we've been able to more than triple the buffer in both cameras. So, I mean, in the case of the Z6 II, for example, we can take up to 124 shots in a row at 14 frames per second. So even if you're not a sports and action photographer, even just kind of these bursts, they can get quicker with 14 frames per second. So that's up from 12 frames per second. But what's key there is the buffer. Again, something that professionals are demanding as well. We've also more than tripled the buffer on the Z7 II. A couple of other things that people have really been asking for is the vertical battery grip. So a functional vertical battery grip. We had a battery pack in Gen 1 with the MBN 10. Now we have the MBN 11, and this now accepts 2 batteries. It has a shutter release on it, sub-command dial, main command dial, joystick at the back for your focus points. And it's even hot swappable, the batteries. So right now, I think all 4 of us are actually running this on our Nikon Z cameras. But what we can do here for extended video productions, time lapses, or even just doing web conferencing like this, we can have a hot swappable battery. So you have one always working in and another one being hot swappable. Other things that we've put in here is better low light performance. So autofocus in low light is key because we can now focus in half the amount of light with the second generation of Z6 II and Z7 II, among other things that I'm sure we'll get into. But those are kind of the top things for now that we've really addressed with this next generation of cameras. In addition to many video features that we've added, such as 4K 60, that's really important for the video community as well. So I can go on and on, but
No, that's amazing. No, that's amazing, Mark. Thank you for that. Because before I leave you and go to Joe and Charmy, I just expand on what you mentioned before and the two new lenses that were introduced last week or so, and how that plays into the growth of the Z Nikkor system now, and how many lenses do we have? How many do we have to come?
Yeah, you know, when we released this system back in 2018, we really had 2 cameras, 3 lenses, and an adapter. And it was really reliant on people to adapt their existing F-mount lenses onto the new mirrorless bodies with that FTZ adapter. Now we have today, we have 16 lenses, 2 teleconverters, and 5 bodies. So the Z6 and Z7 are still available, as well as we have the Z5 now, and these 2 new bodies. Excuse me, that would make it 5 full frame bodies. I'm also forgetting the Z50, which is our DX crop body. So we have a breadth of choice. We've basically been coming out with a new product every month if you divide it over the last 2 years, and more to come. So we are projected to have 8 more lenses by the end of 2021 for a grand total of 24 lenses, which is important because this really makes it a viable system for people that want to stay native to the Z mount. And that's really the whole reason why people are getting into the Z6 and Z7, and now the Z6 II and Z7 II are for the ability to use this new glass. And the glass that you mentioned that we just released is very important. That's the 50mm 1.2. That takes advantage of the large mount, large Z mount that we've been promising ever since we launched the system. And what's important about the 14 to 24 2.8 is that it rounds out the trinity of 2.8 zooms. So we now have the complete set of 70 to 200, 24 to 70, and 14 to 24, all in 2.8 at the S line. That's our highest level of lens. So that's exciting, and it all comes in this perfect storm right now on October 14th.
That's beautiful. And thank you again, Mark, for that. And I think that truly does define the rapid expansion of the Z mirrorless system in a nutshell. And I'm going to turn to you, Joe, first, because one of the things I've loved about Nikon and our system is the versatility, but you have had options. And certainly, you know, Joe and I, we started in the film days back in the day, rolled into the transition of digital technology and DSLRs, and now we're into mirrorless. Of everything Mark said, you know, about some of this newer technology, Joe, your first impression of the Z7 II, because that's the camera you shot, all of what Mark just said, what's important to you?
Well, I could be really simple in my response and say all of it, you know, the speed, the dual card slots, the improved AF performance, it's all part of a package. But for me, being a photographer for a long time, what I've always valued about the Nikon system is that the camera still feels like a Nikon. You know, I've made the transition, as you said, from film to digital DSLR and now to mirrorless. And honestly, when I confronted mirrorless, I thought the transition was going to be harder for me because I had been so used to previous systems. But the thing about the Z system is it feels like a Nikon. The menus are really familiar. The feel is strong and durable. It, you know, just, I can grab it and it feels like I'm home again, you know? So even though we're changing and evolving rapidly technology-wise, the camera still remains to me as familiar as the cameras I used 20 or 30 years ago, which means then I have that comfort level that I can go after and do my job.
Beautiful. Charmy, turning to you, of all of those great features Mark Cruz just talked about and improvements in technology, I know you smile. I saw that big bright smile come with the second card slot. I saw it. You glowed a little bit when we talked second card slot, but talk about that second card slot and a few of the other first impressions you've had of the Z6 II, because that's the camera you got to shoot.
Yeah, that second card slot for me is everything because I have an immediate backup. And, you know, we really, wedding photographers, we've kind of trained our clients to understand the benefit of, look, like we have this second card slot with our D850s and our DSLRs. And so now we can continue to say that and say, hey, we have you covered on the backup. No, it's not a problem. So for me, that backup card slot is amazing. for a variety of reasons, not just backup, but also storage. So that's amazing, but also low light capability for wedding photographers. We're shooting mosh pits in concert halls is what it feels like all the time for receptions. And so low light capability is going to be amazing. The one thing that I really loved also is auto area. And Mark may have to correct me here because I don't already know the technology.
I got you. I know what you're talking about
Yeah.
because you're raving about it on the shoot. It's the wide area AFL where you can do the eye detect within a confined area.
Yes, that is such a big deal. I love it. So when I have a bride walking down the aisle, I don't have to worry about, the eye focus finding the wrong person. I can kind of set the zone that she'll be in and I'll have it. And, one less thing to worry about, and I can just focus on the moment and on my composition and not think too much about focusing.
So, Mark Cruz, Joe mentioned familiarity. Can you do me a favor and speak to the battery system of this camera? Talk about the backward and forward compatibility. And you had mentioned charging through USB-C and actually shooting. Talk a little bit about the battery system, because I know it's important to any photographer to have to go out and buy new batteries and that use the batteries that already work in their systems of D850 and Z6 and Z7, et cetera. Talk about the battery performance here.
Yeah, so really simple. The battery is from a line called the ENEL 15 batteries, and we're now into the 4th generation of this battery. Same size, same shape as when it was originally announced several years ago. So you can actually use your D850 battery or D7000 battery all the way back then to 2011, I believe. So we've been using this battery for a while, but we've have been having larger capacity now. So with the ENEL 15C, you can take more shots with it with this camera. You can also charge it while it's in the camera. I think a lot of people have been accustomed to charging batteries in the product, such as their iPhone and their all these things that are built in. So you can do that now through the USB port rather than carrying around, say, a cradle to take it out and charge in. These batteries also allow you to use things like a USB power delivery. So for example, right now I am shooting on this Zoom meeting right now on my Z5. And similarly to the Z5, I can plug in a USB plug on the side of the camera and allow it to be powered completely through the USB port. So it's not actually draining power from my battery. And that's something that's an intelligence that they've built into these new cameras now. And now in the Z6 II and Z7 II, you can actually power the camera through the USB port. And you can do this with any of the batteries. So I think what you're getting at bottom line is that there's many options. I talked about the battery grip, but I think what's more important for people that have been using our system for a while, that have DSLRs, such as Joe and Charmy, that want to be able to swap between them. You can actually take the battery from a Z6 II or Z7 II and use it in your D850 or D800. And you can also take those batteries and use it in these cameras. So I think the ecosystem that we've created is very smart in that we've allowed the cross use of all these batteries with all these different models. There are several different models that I don't know by heart right now. I should, I guess. But the great thing is the batteries actually got better and they're cross compatible.
Thank you so much, Mark. That's excellent. All right, Charmy, I'm going to turn to you. I always like to go back in time, and Brian Hetrick and I get on the phone with you, and we call you up to say, we got this idea, we got an assignment, but we can't tell you what it's about. And it involves something new, and you're going to have to keep it hush-hush, a little bit of a secret. Talk about what goes through your mind as a photographer when a client calls you up and offers you an assignment like this, and how do you start to begin to prepare for it and come up with a solution to what we need you to do?
I usually don't know what you need me to do. So usually the first thing I think about is aesthetics and what I want it to feel like. And so, normally I'm shooting weddings that are completely out of my control when it comes to what it's going to feel like and what it's going to look like. But I know that I want it to feel have that same wedding feeling, couple portraits, but I get to decide. And the thing I think that has been to my benefit this time especially is that I have been shooting these very intimate weddings that are very ornate, but just two people. And so I ran with that. I was like, let's make a wedding that's just two people. Let's find a wedding venue and, you know, hire a set design person who's going to make me a wedding, and then I'll have my couple get fake married. It'll be great.
That's awesome. And by the way, those of you tuning in, it's very important that if you've got questions, just pop them in the live chat box below. And we have some Nikon representatives waiting for those questions to answer them for you. If something we're talking about doesn't necessarily answer the questions that you have. So Charmy, we come to you and we say, okay, well, we know you specialize in these beautiful Indian weddings. We need detail, we need color, we need the best, sharpest pictures. So you put this shoot together. Talk to me about how, you know, you haven't seen this body, but we did give you a little hint and said, just think Z6, and that'll give you that familiarity that you need. But we were sworn to secrets, and that's what Mark Cruz and I and the rest of the Nikon crew have to deal with probably long before you ever do. But talk about the preparation for the shoots, the type of lenses you were thinking about using. I know we wanted to use all native Z-Nikkor lenses. What was your approach there, and how do you put a shoot like this together? I'm sure people would be interested in knowing.
The first few things that I do is secure a set designer and then secure wardrobe, which, you know, can be difficult sometimes because you want to make sure you're fashion forward and current. And then this time I decided I wanted a real couple. So I did not hire models. I went hunting for a real couple that wanted to be in front of the camera, and I found one. And then I actually have one of the models, I guess, that you're going to see is one of my former brides whose micro wedding I shot the month before project. I just wanted it to feel as real as it could. And so having a real couple that really loves each other is kind of helpful. So once all the pieces fall into place, I just wait for you to show up with some magic stuff I don't know about. But my kit that day, I wanted to keep it very realistic to how I shoot weddings. And so I had my 35 and my 85 because those are primarily still how I shoot weddings. And those are some of the first lenses that came out for the F-line and are fantastic. And then I also had a 70-200, which is the opposite of how I used to shoot. But it's just such a great lens. So I did have it with me and I did break it out a little bit.
I remember when you did an assignment for us with the 70-200, you begged to keep it. And I was like, no, that's mine. I got to get it back. It does. You become so used to the gear, and the lenses, the fixed lenses you were talking about were part of the 1.8 line of Z-Nikkor glass. And, you know, when we introduced the camera, we also introduced a 0.95 58 millimeter Noct. And I know, Joe, with you, we're going to talk more about the 50 millimeter f1.2 later. But this is what we mean by this really rapidly growing line, to have all of these options come together. And Mark before mentioned the trinity of 2.8s, 1424, 2470, 7200. That's got to make it easy for photographers to just go out with the least amount of gear to cover these types of assignments. So, Charmy, if you don't mind, I would love to start sharing some of your photos. And as we go through these, you know, we'll tap through them casually, but talk a little bit about the assignment. Is this your former bride or the bride you've shot before at a micro wedding?
This is just part of a couple. You'll see her, I believe you will see her fiance. So they actually got engaged a week before the assignment, which was very convenient because they're in that post-engagement glow. I think one of the reasons my brides come to me is that they want to have that editorial bend to their wedding coverage. And so we made sure that we had this really ornate, detailed set. And then we set her free, gave her permission to feel beautiful and feel like a model. And she actually does model on the side a little bit. She's an analyst for her day job. But yeah, I just wanted her to feel permission to do whatever she wanted to do, like she's on the cover of a magazine. And here's where we got started. So
this camera, the Z6 II, gets put in your hands.
Yeah.
Talk about that familiarity. Were we telling the truth? It was an easy transition for you? Talk about that.
Completely easy transition. You did tell me absolutely nothing except that except that it would be an easy transition, and it really was. It's the body, you know, but I felt this way about the Z6 originally anyway, is that the body is so familiar. It is such a Nikon camera that moving from, you know, moving between my D850 and my Z6 is really not that big of a difficult challenge in the first place. But the Z6 II just falls right in there with a couple extra goodies.
For those of the people tuning in for your camera settings, what exposure mode are you shooting in? You know, what are you choosing? You mentioned the IAF before. What are some of the things you're doing to set the camera, set the color, set the white balance? And I assume you're shooting the RAW file format?
Yep, shooting RAW. I did just let it go auto. The auto white balance on the Z's is so good that I don't usually have to mess with it unless there's a mixed lighting situation. It's pretty accurate. My RAW file, I would say, is pretty close to this white balance wise. I also used that. What did Mark? What did you call it?
Yeah, it was the wide area AF.
Wide area AF. Yes.
Yeah.
For humans, not animals. I think there's.
Right. Yes, there are both. You're right.
Yeah. And I use that. And the reason I use that is, you know, it was my first time using this particular thing, and I really wanted to put it through the paces and see if it was really going to benefit me. And so I had her constantly laughing and like jumping forward while she laughed and back again, just because I wanted to be able to trust it. And so I had to test it. But man, it delivered every single time. You'll see, I think perhaps the next photo also, she was, yes. So she started out in the back and she, you know, leaned forward pretty fast, and the camera kept up with her really well.
Yeah, I've been doing a lot of photography of action and definitely noticed the acquisition and speed and accuracy of the focus has jumped up in a big improvement. And so happy to have had those experiences myself. These pictures are beautiful. What lens are you using for a shot like this, Charmy?
I'm going to be guessing a little bit, but I'm going to assume that it's the 85 because I believe I stayed with the 35 and the 85, except for a couple of shots towards the end that are 70-200.
Mm-hmm. So as you're trying to capture these magical moments in somewhat of this mock wedding, how are you guiding, you know, the models? Are you just saying, hey, act like you're getting married, or?
Oh, no. So this is actually Deshanti. She's my former bride. She got married in a micro wedding last month.
Can you explain what a micro wedding is?
Yeah. So micro weddings are basically ceremony only, no reception. We're not doing a dance floor where there's germs. We're sticking to the ceremony, and there's a lot fewer guests. The ones I'm shooting are not less ornate. They're, you know, investing in their decor and putting effort into the venue, but there's only, you know, 30, 40 people in attendance, and it's ceremony only, and then a lot of portraits.
We had asked you to provide a bunch of shots again. We're talking about color and talking about detail. What's your approach to a shot like this? It's clearly showing the detail and sharpness of the Z6 II.
Yeah. I love that I can count on edge-to-edge sharpness from these lenses. It's ridiculous. I honestly, when we were dressing her, we brought a variety of options, and I just wanted to make sure that we really had the most ornate stuff that we could put on her, just so that we could take something like this. You know, when we started this, it was actually for an intimate shot of the two of them, and we did get that. But when you see all the details come together, you can't help but shoot it all, right?
Beautiful. And again, those of you tuning in, if you got a question, drop it down in the chat box below. We've got some people standing by to answer questions as we go. Mark Cruz, I want to bring you back in here because, Charmy, you mentioned low light capabilities. I know, Mark, you quickly went through the ISO capabilities of Z6 II. Can you dig in a little bit further and give us all the skinny on ISO here?
Yeah, the Z6 II has a ISO range from 100 to 51,200. And I would say at this point in time, this is our best low light performing camera outside of the D6 because of that native ISO range. And there's also a high 1 and high 2 that approximates 100 and 200,000 ISO as well. So people have flexibility with this camera for stills as well as for video. But one of the big improvements that we've done as well when shooting in low light is it can focus, this is getting a little bit tech, as low as a negative 4.5 EV. So the previous generation was a full EV, darker than that. So basically, we can focus in half the amount of light, which is important for people shooting in kind of these venues, especially when it comes to weddings, dark reception halls, maybe even low ambient light, churches and things of that nature, where they really have to focus only with ambient light. Other light sources aren't an option. So that's one of the big advancements that we've had in the second generation, both from the Z7 II as well as the Z6 II, is the low light autofocusing capability has been improved by a full stop.
That's amazing. So, guys, when he talks tech, I think I get excited. You know, it makes me happy. So, Mark, don't be afraid to go deep dive teching here today, because this is what people, the gearheads tuning in, want to know this stuff, and you certainly have it all down, and thank you for that. So, Charmy, talk a little bit about ISO, because you mentioned it before. How far did you push the camera? Did you feel comfortable and more comfortable than you have in the past?
I actually did not have the opportunity to push it as far as I normally would, because we're not shooting receptions, and because that just wasn't available to me. But clean files, definitely. It was a cloudy day, and it was a frustratingly cloudy day, since the venue we were in was a greenhouse, and I was really hoping for bright weather that day. But I think, however far I did take it, and I'm not 100% sure, every single file is super clean and beautiful.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's a testimonial. These photos are just beautiful. I know you didn't have a lot of time, because to make it easy for you, not only do we, give you this assignment with short notice, but we also give you a limited amount of time to make it work, edit the pictures, and get them back to us, because we have had to launch today. And that's the beauty of how we move here. That's how we roll, and hope that we didn't put too much pressure on you. But thank you for those pictures. And let me talk to Mr. McNally here. Let me bring back up the screen. Joe, you've been sitting patiently over there. We call you up. You and I have done this many times. A lot of cryptic messages. I think that we have termed everything the new tech when we've come to you, and you and I, so we don't have to worry about code names and names of the products. We just go with the new tech. We give you this call. Tell everybody how the mind of Joe McNally starts to work.
That's a dangerous place to go, Mike.
Yeah, I think that may be an entire segment on its own, but go ahead, Joe. I'm sorry.
Well, let me just first off say that it's so wonderful to partner in this, not only with Nikon, but also with Charmy. Those pictures, Charmy, just like, oh my goodness, they're beautiful. They are beautiful. You've got a sweet, sweet, lovely eye, and it's just an honor to be here with you. And I could turn it back over and you could keep showing pictures, as far as I'm concerned. But yeah, I mean, when I get in a job like this, it's a wonder. It's like being let loose in the playground, because Nikon comes to you and says, we have this XYZ project, can't talk about it. It's going to be cool. The technology is going to be amazing, but you figure this out before you even really know what it is actually all about. I was in the same boat with Charmy. The one thing I did get a mandate from Nikon, or kind of a watchword that I observed during the assignment, was color, resolution, detail. Fill the frame. Let the camera chew on stuff, because this camera has an amazing resolution, and there's a depth and richness to the files. I don't know if Charmy experienced this as well, but the color resolution and the vibrance of it. And I was playing with the auto white balance, backing it. It's pretty smart, absolutely. I was playing with the different modes of auto white balance and watching the camera change in response to scenes. I was using flash, mixing daylight and flash. The autofocus, I didn't stress it by having sort of running subjects, etc. But I shot a couple of scenes that were fiercely backlit with the 70-200. And the camera, it hunted. It went right in there and grabbed. And that just, again, made my job so much easier. It allows me to relax behind the camera, to the degree you ever relax behind the camera, but just kind of think about the picture, not worry about the tech, think about the picture.
Thank you, Joe. And I want to bring Mark Cruz back in here because a lot of what Joe talked about is a big part of the power of XSpeed 6. Mark Cruz, talk a little bit more about XSpeed, how it expands throughout the system, what it's responsible for. You mentioned it earlier, but now dig in with some of that techie stuff that we want to hear.
You know, XSpeed is our processor, and it touches a lot of different parts of the camera. I mentioned before, it touches the buffer, it touches, you know, the shooting speed, but it also does touch all these other things that the camera has to make decisions on, and real-time processing, such as white balance. And I'm glad we have actually Joe here to talk about that in a more qualitative sense. I was talking to him, and I was actually glad he was on this panel because that's something that's hard to communicate, you know, quantitatively. It's a qualitative thing, but it affects the picture very much, and it's hard for us to really nail that down with a number. It's actually impossible. You really have to have, you know, sort of anecdotal evidence, and as we're going to see with Joe's pictures right now and his sort of experience with the camera. That's really important for people. As Charmy mentioned also, she relies on auto white balance. I mean, that's something that the camera itself with the XSpeed processing engine has to make those decisions on, with ever-changing color casts. You know, you might be going from, she was hoping for a sunny day and it ended up being an overcast day. And those are things that the XSpeed processing engine has to make decisions on in real time. And as a photographer, you don't have time to sit and kind of tweak all those Kelvin temperatures. You want to really rely on the camera to allow you to be creative and kind of just focus on composition, focus on the talent, allow the autofocus to basically take over the chore of making sure things are in focus. And we know that the lenses for the Nikkor S-line are very sharp, but that resolution and the sharpness doesn't mean much if it's not in focus. So the reliability of the focusing systems now in the Z6 II and the Z7 II work in harmony with those lenses. So I think we're at a point in time right now in 2020 where we're really coming close to the best of all worlds and allowing creators like Charmy and Joe to really take their photography to another level, because they can really focus and concentrate on what's in front of them and not have to battle the camera and the tech to make it do what it wants them to do.
Thank you so much for that, Mark. And before we jump into Joe and his assignments and pictures, you know, Joe, you shoot in a certain way of controlled, sometimes not so controlled. Charmy, in the wedding atmosphere with everything Mark just talked about, how important it is for those dual processors to be working. I have to be honest with you, when I click the shutter, the last thing I think about is the little XSpeed processors that are in the camera. And now there's two of them, so it's even better for me because, right, two of them means better, right? And but I don't think about that when I'm shooting. So how important that is to you, Charmy, as a shooter, when you're shooting the receptions and you're not sitting there controlling the environment?
I mean, for me, 98% of the day is things that I can't control. So gear that is reliable, fast, on its feet, without me having to think about how it's on its feet is so, so, so important. You know, at weddings, anything can be thrown at you. I once shot a barat where the groom was on a horse in the middle of a hurricane. So like, you just need your gear to be on top of its operations so that you can just do your job.
Beautiful. All right, Joe, we're back to you now because we want to dig into your shoots. And the things that Mark was saying was a reminder to me once that I remember you publicly saying it, you know, trust the camera. You know, there's a lot of fodder out there, but what I would trust, what I wouldn't. And you were talking in the terms of TTL at one point, and you said, the engineers put so much into this camera. I don't understand, but I know it works, and let the camera do the job. So start a little bit by talking about that technology. And then, Joe, roll into, when we give you this call, dig into the assignments that you had. We actually kind of pushed you a bit harder to do multiple assignments for us. So talk about what you did for the Z7 II.
Sure. Yes, and in response to that question, like, what do you trust the camera for? I always respond to that. I'm like, look, if you have a camera like this and you don't trust it and use it to its fullest of capabilities, it's like owning a Maserati and only driving it to church on Sundays. You know, I mean, let that puppy roll. Trust it and see where it can take you. So yes, there was a bit of a push, and I lost sleep. You know, prior to this assignment, I was waking up at 2 o'clock in the morning, chewing on it, thinking on it, etc. I shot a bit of fashion, which I've been shooting for a number of years now. I find it kind of falls in line with my imagination and allows me to ramble anywhere in the world of color, or flights of fancy, or fancy clothes, or settings that are really kind of otherworldly. And I had the opposite situation from Charmy. She had clouds. I scouted my main location on a cloudy day, and my imagination started spooling in that direction. Then on my shoot day, it was sun like blazes, and I had a flip. Virtually none of the situations I scouted did I end up shooting. So that's where the camera does become your partner, because you pivot, right? Being on location is just a series of pivots. You can have the greatest plan in the world and watch it dissolve, in the face of weather, in the face of time, in the face of location logistics that go off the rails. All of that stuff can happen to you. So that's why the cameras nowadays, for me, are really intuitive partners in the process. I know I can take them anywhere I need to go.
Beautifully said. And again, those of you tuning in, if you got a question, pop it into the chat box below. We've got people standing by answering questions for you today. So Joe, talk about the specific assignments themselves. Before I pull up the picture, you had 3 assignments. Just give us a quick brief on what those assignments were.
Sure. The first one we called Garden and Grit. Nikon said, we want the frame filled with detail and lots of color. So we found an old mansion type of a place in Connecticut, and we went there. We had 2 wonderful models, and we had them adorned with all sorts of gowning and very, very powerfully, kind of colorful garments, but also some garments that were powerfully subtle, because I wanted to push the camera back and forth into the primary realm and then see how it did with shadings of subtle color. And then, thankfully, amazing, we've got a new controller for SB5000. So I did a run and gun shoot with a couple of speedlights, and we were actually working on subway platforms in New York City. The subway platforms are not as populated as they would ordinarily be, so we had a little bit of an easier time, but it was run and gun all the way. And then in the last assignment I did, it came about that just by luck, the new 50-1.2 and the 14-28 were available. So I kind of designed a shot around them. I wanted to shoot it out on the street. It involved a checker taxi and a dancer, but shooting on the street nowadays, the amount of permitting and all that, insurance, et cetera, oh man. So we moved inside to kind of an old warehouse in Brooklyn and shot it in there.
So just for those of you tuning in, you never want to correct the master, and I don't want to do it now. But I know you said 14-28. It's actually 14-24.
28?
Yeah, but that's okay. You know what, Joe? We've always said our success is about the people around us. No, I just didn't want people to think there was a different lens option than what Mark Cruz had.
Oh my goodness, that would cause a firestorm on the internet.
Absolutely.
Nikon actually has a 14-28. No, my mistake.
Listen, this is the internet, because if it's on the internet, it's true, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. You heard it here first, folks.
No, that's awesome. So thank you. Let's look at some of the pictures on this shoot, and you can share a few more details here, Mr. McNally.
Sure.
And as you said, the color, the dresses, the garb, the model, all beautiful. What do you got going on here?
Well, I thought about this scene actually in terms of the primary color wheel. Red, green, blue. I just went back there, and this is actually a wall that I had scouted, and originally we're going to use the flip side of this wall. On the day of the sun, you kind of have to make a change. So we went to the shadow side, and I lit her. But then, me being me, I can't leave well enough alone. There's a warm light coming through that archway. That's a large flash on the other side of the wall. And then I pushed a little light at her. This is a 24-70, and I don't shoot a wide angle lens all that much in the vertical realm because you have to be careful with it. But the lens just embraced this situation so wonderfully. And that's been a go-to lens for me for years because it's durable and it's tack sharp.
Beautiful. And I know we're going to talk more about lenses as we go through, but that first moment, because again, like Charmy, we didn't give you the cameras until the day of the shoot.
Yes.
Again, confidentiality up to a launch is very important to us, and there's all kinds of rumors out there that aren't true. And so go back to that familiarity as we're showing some more of these pictures from your shoot to how you were able to handle that camera out of the gate.
Sure. Again, familiarity was key. You know, it felt exactly like my regular tried and true Z7, you know. In fact, the form factor, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mark, I think the form factor is exactly the same.
Yes, you're right.
You know, so, and the menu patterns are the same, even though there's some new kind of bells and whistles in there. So I didn't feel hamstrung. You know, Brian came from Nikon with this box of stuff, you know, and he said, well, here you go. And, you know, and then, you know, you start shooting with it, you know. I mean, I've always had the philosophy that it's a camera. Give me a camera, I can shoot it, you know. So I kind of tweaked the menus a little bit to get myself to a familiar place. This is an 85 shot at 1.8. And what you just saw, here's another thing that oftentimes people don't kind of maybe discuss. The last two pictures that you just saw, the lady in green, was shot pano format. This, with the lady in the floral jacket, is square because the lenses are so sharp, the resolution is so good, and the color is so true that you can now manipulate your frame, right? Without losing anything. So I've always loved square format portraiture, and I love the wide area, you know, kind of approach, the cinematic approach to a scene. So the camera just gives you that with a flick of a button. I mean, this is like, you know, this is a gift, you know, to be able to just punch your way through the field of frame and also employ all the other stuff, you know, that's in your favor. Auto white balance and the shades of difference within the auto white balance, the autofocus, all that stuff I'm relying on heavily in the course of the shoot.
Can you expand on your settings, though, as Charmy did for the way she shoots weddings? When you're approaching this, talk about white balance, talk about file format, talk about your autofocus mode, and what were your experiences with that?
Sure. I did use the eye detect, you know, hats off on that. The wide area is now, the eye detect is available in that large area, you know, so what I'm looking for that to do for me is to obviously grab the eyes, seek and confirm on the eyes, because these women I worked with were amazing. And Munira here, you have to kind of get with the soul of your model. You know, you just meet them on that day. They're really good at what they do. You kind of sort it out with them, but they were very different. Munira has this amazing angularity, and she's a very physical model, and she would move really fast. So when she made a turn, I counted on the eye detect to keep up with her, okay? Snap in and keep me safe. Now with Renee, the lady in green, she didn't get overwhelmingly physically active, but she could change an entire scene just with a look. She had soul in her eyes. And as a photographer, you go for that, right? You just respond to that immediately at the camera. And she had this lustrous beauty right in here, and she could just shade her eyes, and the emotional tenor of the photograph would change like that. So right. I'm relying on the eye detect here, big time. And then I'm also flipping up in the auto white balance. The beautiful thing about AWB, you know, when we got it, it was just that, right? It was auto white balance, but now there's differentiation. You can retain warm colors, you can cool it down, and still stay in the realm of an intuitive response in the auto white balance realm. So, you know, you're looking at a happy photographer.
Good. We're glad you're happy. Mark Cruz, I want to bring you back in. Can you talk a little more about the AF technology and what it's doing with face recognition and IAF? What's happening in the background here?
Yeah, I'm glad you pitched it over to me because I wanted to jump in there.
I saw you. You were excited.
I was excited about this picture because it shows you that some of the things that a Z camera can do that actually a DSLR just can't. I mean, Joe talked about the IAF here. If you look at this composition, this actually on pretty much all DSLRs, the eye is outside of the focus points. So you would literally have to do a focus and recompose. And even when you do that, there's the slightest bit of depth of field difference where you might not get it tack sharp. What the Z system can do, and now especially with the Z7 II and Z6 II, is that with these eye detects, you can focus practically anywhere in the frame. So it covers 90% of the frame edge to edge. And this is consistent also with our first generation Z6 and Z7, now with the Z6 7.2 and Z6.2, you can focus anywhere in the frame. And Joe's also utilized a built-in crop feature here. As he said, he likes to use a square crop format. I believe he didn't do this after the fact. You can actually do this in camera. And it allows you to compose the way you want the end result to be without having to guess or approximate and forcing yourself to shoot in a 2:3 ratio all the time for every single picture. You can actually get the end result as you're taking the picture because you can frame it up that way and still get the raw file. So just seeing this picture here makes a lot of those tech things come alive because I can see how the relevance of eye detect works here. And as you kind of mentioned, we've taken it a step further in terms of the reliability, but also allowing it to be relegated to a smaller area of the frame instead of a larger area. So for those of you that have been using the Z6 and Z7 already and know about the eye detect that we've put in there in the firmware 2.0, what's different about the version 2 of these cameras is that you can take the wide area AF-L feature, and within that you can turn on eye detect so it's only looking for eyes in that red box. And this is especially important if you have multiple people in the photo or you don't want the autofocus to search for other things within that large frame, but concentrate only where your subject's head is in the frame. So that gives you, I think, freedom of composition and more so reliability of the camera.
These are marked improvements. And again, rapidly expanding Z mirrorless system. Those of you tuning in, if you got a question, we got a chat box on the bottom. Feel free to drop it in there. We've got representatives standing by to answer your questions. But that's amazing technology. Charmy, I want to turn to you real quick. I love this feature, 90% coverage, of autofocus points. I'm always now shifting my compositions off. How important is it to have that autofocus mark go away from the center and towards the edges of the frame?
So I've actually always been a person who leans towards strange compositions. That was actually one of my first presentations I ever did for Nikon, is how much I love weird compositions. And so being able to being able to execute strange compositions without having to focus and recompose and think about whether I've lost my sharpness, that's huge. Now I can just be weird all the time.
Beautiful. And Mark, before I let you go, although we're talking about still photography in this segment, and we were talking with filmmakers Chris Hirschman and Kitty Peters next to talk about video in the next segment, this does work in video now, right, Mark?
That's right. That's one of the big marked improvements, is that we can now do eye detect in video as well. And this feature as well with the wide area AF is also available for video. That was one of the things that the first generation lacked. It was only a stills feature, but now we've ported it over for video as well.
Beautiful. All right, Mr. McNally, we're going to come back to you. Let's talk about the remaining pictures that you have moved over here. I know we're going to talk a little bit more about something you just kind of teased a little bit that I want Mark involved in when the shot is appropriate, the new flash trigger, radio trigger that we have introduced as well. But talk about this shot and let's roll into the remaining pictures you shot.
Sure. I mean, just briefly, I wanted to stress the camera in the primary realm of color, but I also wanted to see what it would do with something very subtle. So, photographers, we love old stuff, patina and cracked walls and all that sort of, it just gets our juices going. So I saw this wall and I immediately thought, yes. And then the key to this assignment really is production. I'm blessed with a wonderful producer, Lynn Del Mastro, who, when we liaison, part of our team at the studio, we reach out to Sam Brown, Samantha Brown style. She goes out and finds these wonderful clothes. So I had this team effort behind me here at the camera, producing a look that is off the charts with color or super subtle. So this wall spoke to this gown, and that's again Renee, who was just absolutely wonderful to work with.
Beautiful. So we talk about run and chase photos in the subway. What's going on here? And this is now where you incorporate a couple of speed lights, right?
Yes, 2 speed lights through 2 small, little light shapers, low profile. We're looking around, needing to sort of maintain kind of an off the radar status on this. And this is my friend Les, who I've known now for about 3 years, I met him on Fifth Avenue. He was playing really well. I sat down and talked to him. And since I've done a story about him prior to this involvement, and when I thought about this project, I thought Les would be perfect. So I called him up, and he was down, you know, so we headed out to Brooklyn, and he just started playing. That's the beautiful thing about working with musicians. You know, you just put him in front of the camera and say, do your thing, man, lose yourself in your music. And then it's up to you to accommodate that at camera and stay with his expressions and emotion as he plays his instrument.
So let me jump back to Mark Cruz real quick. Mark, can you give us a little skinny on the new radio remote for the Speedlight system?
Yes, the WR11B rolls off the tongue. This is our kind of second generation now as well of these radio remotes. So the keyword there is radio. I know that obviously Joe is an expert in flash department, has been using our TTL system in infrared for a long time. This is kind of a game changer when we introduced these radio remotes in, I think it's 2016 when we brought out the D5. But the great thing about it is we have these radio triggers available also for the 10 pin on the D5 and D6s and D850s of that sort. We also have it for the remote port of the Z7 II and Z6 II. So with this little trigger that you put in the side port of the camera, you can remote control an SB5000 in radio. So that means you can hide the flashes in positions where you normally would have had trouble using infrared because that relies on line of sight. With the system now, you can group more flashes. You can set them off in broad daylight. A lot of times the signal from broad daylight interferes with the infrared signal and it kind of gets confused. With the radio now, you have reliability at greater distances, up to 66 feet away, but you also have, I think actually 100 feet away, but you also have reliability in positioning the flash in places where you don't want it to be obviously so obvious out of frame, but also behind certain objects. And then lastly, you also have the flexibility of remote controlling it right from the body of the Z7 II or Z6 II. No need for any extra, you know, device that goes on top of the hot shoe. This goes right on the side of the camera, and it's kind of nicely tucked out of the way, but very reliable in the way it can trigger these flashes.
Beautiful. Now, Joe, I want to use the word pioneer here, and I don't mean pioneer in a sense of old. I mean pioneer in a sense of starting something and a trend that not many people start. Don't lose it on me, Mr. McNally. But let's face it, you are the pioneer of use of small flash, where a lot of people weren't trusting it, not thinking it could do the job, not thinking it had the power to do what it needed to do. You proved everybody wrong. What is your strategy on this shoot? You said you used 1 or 2 lights. How are you working with this, and what are you trying to do with the quality of light here?
Well, first of all, I don't give myself credit for pioneering. I just, you know, I grabbed the technology and started working with it because I kind of had to, you know, this is survival mode as a photographer, you know, like what do I have to do to kind of stay with the game here and keep working? So yes, I've seen TTL technology, as Mark said, evolve over the years. These are SB5000s with the new controller, one high and one low, little small soft boxes. And I'm in close to less here with a 2470. I also triggered them, you know, Mark, I'll feed back to you. I triggered them way down the subway platform when I'm using a 70-200, lock solid. Right. And that's a great thing because one of the things that can mess with a radio signal is the density of the neighborhood you're in. New York is just a hotbed of RF everywhere. And the controller cut through it and was very reliable in triggering these flashes. And from a distance, I had the TTL control or the manual control. And, you know, I can switch back and forth with the controller. I can, you know, goose the flash or dim it or do whatever I need. So in this instance, I'm real close to Les. Other instances, I was really separated from him. And I'm looking for a poppy quality of light, something that is nice, but not overly subtle. You can see it's pretty hard sunlight out there on the platform. But also, too, he was in shadow underneath the roof of the subway platform. So without flash, you know, I'm cooked.
Beautiful, beautiful. And Mark, thank you for the technical, and Joe, thank you for the use of it. Real brief, Joe, we want to talk in the matter of timing and all this. For the third segment of your shoot, we were able to get you the 1424 f2.8 and the 50mm 1.2. Real quick, your first impressions of those two lenses.
Well, you know, like Mark mentioned the Trinity, the 1424, okay, 2470, 7200 are three lenses that always go out the door with me. And in some instances, they're the only lenses that'll go out because I can do just about anything with them. So to have this on an S series mount for the Z system is a wonderful enlarging of the system. And we just see this thing and the possibilities getting bigger and bigger all the time. So this is my first crack at it, I mean, my only crack at it. Charmy, isn't it unfair, don't you think? They bring you all this really hot new gear and then they take it away. I know,
Listen,
So,
Mark and I don't plan to do that, nor does anybody else at Nikon, but I got to tell you, this is so much fun. And real quick on the 51.2, Joe, what were your impressions?
51.2 was bang on sharp, and it was also an opportunity when I used it. You can see Jay here, the dancer. We styled him in a hat pretty relentlessly, so I was able to use the pinpoint focus on the Z system, and I had to sneak that cursor under his hat and get into his eye. So that, as opposed to something that is wide and will grab a lot of stuff, the pinpoint matching up with that lens at 1.2 was gangbusters.
Beautiful. All right, guys, this has been incredible. Like a lot of great information coming our way, coming out to you guys tuning in. This has been an amazing conversation, and thank you, Mark Cruz, for the technical. Thank you, Charmy, for your experiences in your one-day shoot with no preparation time with the camera, and Joe, the same thing. You guys have really scored pretty big on this. I'm going to brag on some of the features I've loved, and Mark, you can shake your head with me, but new multiple exposure now where I can actually shoot a multiple exposure series with overlay in the camera. So I can actually experience a great multiple exposure, but it saves the NEF files. So now we have the original photos as well as the combined multiple exposure in camera, and you can do it in the retouch menu as well. I've been having a lot of fun with that. But Mark, anything else? Can you speak to me one last thing, which I think is so cool? You can now firmware update from SnapBridge software, if I understand this correctly?
That's correct. You can actually download the firmware onto the memory card using just the app, the SnapBridge app. This saves you from getting a card reader, a laptop, downloading it to the card, putting it in the camera. You can actually just download it from there and in the field update your firmware. And historically, over the last 2 years, we've actually done some pretty significant updates to the cameras via the firmware. We actually introduced eye detect over the firmware update. We've introduced other things, major improvements on the firmware. So that's kind of a new position Nikon has taken and really extending the functionality of existing product via firmware updates. Yep, among other big improvements on here that I can talk all day about, but we have a lot of information on that on our website. But for stills photography, the one thing that I did want to mention is that we can actually now remove all of the information from the viewfinder as well as the screen, so you can really just immerse yourself in your image and not have all these numbers and things like that all around you. That's a kind of a new feature that we've put in there as well.
Beautiful. Well, guys, again, Mark, Charmy, Joe, thank you guys for your time. You guys are awesome. Those of you tuning in, thank you for your time. Please stick around if you are into video. We've got Chris Hirschman, Kitty Peters, and our tech here, Steve Heiner, who's going to give you some great information about the video side of the Z6 II and Z7 II. We can't thank you enough. As Mark said, we could talk for hours about this stuff, but go to NikonUSA.com and the home pages for the Z6 II and Z7 II to catch more of the skinny about what these cameras are about. We're always here to want to inspire you guys and get you guys out on the street shooting. And now we've had the opportunity to talk to two photographers, one using the Z6 II, one using the Z7 II. Got some great experiences from them. So again, thank you all for tuning in. On behalf of Nikon, I'm Mike Corrado, and we'll see you soon.
Every creative has it. Potential.
Do you know what it is? It's that blank canvas inside of you. It's every creative possibility in your future.
It's where your story begins.
It's not always easy to find, but you will find it if you dig deep.
It took me years to discover mine. It took less than a second to recognize it.
Feel it and grab it. And hold it tight.
My natural passion to tell stories became my reality.
Now find yours. It's there, right in front of you.
Setbacks?
There will be plenty.
Learn from them.
Leave them behind and get closer to your creative destiny.
Realize the hidden hopes and dreams.
There is a place for them in this world.
So share them with all of us.
Don't leave your canvas blank.
Be true to yourself.
Find your true potential.
It's time.
Ignite your passion.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this very special Nikon event, part 2. If you watch part 1 about the new introductions we have for Z6 II and Z7 II, we're going to carry that on again for video right now. We are talking about the next chapter of Z with the introduction of 2 new cameras. We're going to talk about Z Nikkor lenses. We've got a great panel with us today to talk about all of this, and 2 people that were the first kids on their block to shoot short films with it, and we're going to debut those films today. How's everybody doing?
Good.
Good.
So we have Kitty Peters from Atola Visuals with us today. She shot a beautiful short film for us. We've got Chris Hirschman. Chris, we've been working together how many years? It was great to be on your shoot with you. But thank you for being here with us. And then the next person I'm introducing is very special to me. We've been working together at Nikon for about 36 years now. We were former Nikon school partners. He's a senior technical manager here at Nikon. His name is Steve Heiner. Steve, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Mike. Good to see you again.
These are ridiculously exciting times. And Steve and I know this through our history at Nikon, and having you guys here too, you've seen a bit of this as you've gone on. Every time there's a new camera, there's new excitement because it means new technology. So we're going to talk about that technology. We want to talk about your first impressions, Kitty and Chris, on these products and things that you learned along the way. And then we're gonna debut these films, and I've seen them both, and they're both terrific. And you know, I don't have that video mind like you guys do, and you guys have been creating forever. And I'm not a storyboard. Give me a camera, let me click, let me fire off a frame rate, and I'm hot and happy. But I know, Steve, you've been involved in video long before it ever became part of the first DSLR, the D90, and we've come such a long way, and I can't wait to talk about that. But let me start, and I'll start with you, Kitty, and we're going to bounce around from Kitty to Chris to Steve. Kitty, just give everybody out there that's tuning in a little bit of insight about who you are. And while you are tuning in, if you have any questions along the way, go into that click box down below and pop in your questions, and we've got Nikon representatives waiting to answer them for you. So, Kitty, take it away. Talk a little bit about your background in video.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kitty. I run Atola Visuals, which is a production company based in California. And I also play with camera gear on my YouTube channel and also do filmmaking hacks on TikTok recently. So I've been having a lot of fun on these social media platforms. And I started off shooting film in high school. And it was a photography class, and I just fell in love with the medium of video and photography. So I do a lot of hybrid shooting, but mostly in the video world. It's so much fun.
Well, we can't thank you enough for being with us. And I'm telling you, folks, by the end of this, the insight that Kitty's going to bring is going to be fantastic. And Chris, I'm turning to you now. You are a Nikon ambassador. Thank you for that. Thank you for the great work you've been doing through the years. Tell everybody a little bit about your history of becoming a filmmaker. And I know you do a lot of rock videos. Talk about it.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Like you said, I'm Chris Hirschman, based out of the Chicagoland area. And I've been shooting with Nikon since I was in high school. And the moment Nikon introduced video into their camera bodies, I immediately began to shoot video and realized I was very good and very quick at, taking my eye for photo and adapting to video. It was a natural fit for me. So I began to make a career out of shooting both photo and video, and I'm a musician, so I turned my focus toward musicians. I went on to make a lot of music videos and worked in the music industry both on the retail side and working with bands. And it's been a blessing to work with these cameras and to have a career just because Nikon decided they wanted to put a new feature into their camera. So very cool stuff.
Well, again, thank you for being here, Chris. And certainly we're going to have a lot to talk about with the films that you created, the film you created. Steve Heiner. Steve Heiner, again, we've been together for a long time. Steve, give everybody a little background on who you are and what you've been doing with this company for 36 years.
Wow, back in the Jurassic period I was, of course, an avid film shooter like both Kitty and Chris. I got involved in photography at a young age, back when the medium was completely different, of course, but I always had an interest in filmmaking. The problem is that years ago, there weren't the sort of readily accessible tools to be a very successful storyteller or filmmaker back in the day. I mean, you could go through the trouble of editing film, but it was very difficult. So as the years progressed, I sort of transitioned from still photography to video. I came from a newspaper photography, photojournalism background. And through my years at Nikon, of course, I was thrilled to see that we were going to finally make products that I could actually use to do filmmaking, since before that I was always borrowing cameras wherever I could. But that's kind of it. I was a newspaper photographer, shot black and white film, color film. I've been with Nikon long enough that that's the only brand I've ever used and advocate, of course. But it's been a lot of fun.
Well, like you, Steve, I've been around for a while. My name is Mike Corrado. In case I didn't introduce myself before, because I tend not to introduce myself. Again, 36 years is a long time to see a lot of this. And even though I may not be on the video side so much, it's so exciting to see how these cameras have evolved. And every time they come out, there's something cool. And we're going to talk about that. But Steve, take us on a little rundown. We got Z6 II, and that's what we're going to focus on during this segment. Certainly the Z7 II shoots video as well. But talk about the advantages of the Z6, Z6 II, and some of the upgrades in the camera, because the Roman numeral 2 is pretty big in this case, right?
It is. And for those of you who are not really familiar with the advantages that just a mirrorless platform provides for people who prefer or do include shooting video, it's a huge step in technology from DSLRs, which are very good at shooting footage, but there are a lot of compromises in actually using an SLR camera that's designed for still imaging. So the excitement behind actually bringing the Z system to market, where video was as an important aspect as the still photography side of the camera, we've now progressed that 2 years into the Z system now to where we've got a couple of products that are quite remarkable. And in fact, in many ways have kind of broken barriers in still photography cameras in terms of their video capabilities. And the Z6 II and the Z7 II are no exception. As you know, our cameras have shot 4K. We also offer a tremendous variety of both in-camera slow motion and true full HD at 120 frames per second. We've also enabled the ability to shoot N-Log at 10-bit to an external recorder. And in fact, this last year, we've actually even offered an optional upgrade to shoot 12-bit RAW, ProRes RAW. So we've got some interesting and very exciting new features in these new cameras coming. Some of the things that are notable are, interestingly enough, the Z7 II, upon introduction, will actually shoot as high as 4K at 60p, which is, you wouldn't think that camera would be first, but we're going to offer 4K at 60p in just a couple of months by way of firmware for the Z6 II. So that's very exciting. We're now, in addition to offering the N-Log 10-bit recording, we're going to incorporate HDR HLG, which is a hybrid log gamma, which is layered on top of a high dynamic range video format at 10-bit that will allow for more color, more contrast, more brightness. This is going to be great. Plus, we're very excited also that in addition to the ProRes RAW optional upgrade, And this will also come, I believe, in February of 2021, which is weirdly enough only a few months away. We will be offering also the option of Blackmagic RAW recording to their outboard recorder too. And there's lots of other subtleties as well. For instance, we've got dual card slots. I know that your last panel, I probably talked about that quite a bit, but having dual card slots is great because you don't have to keep putting cards in. You can just simply roll from one card to the next. We're going to have a new battery grip that actually has hot swappable batteries in it so that you can actually continue to run. In addition to that, we're also going to offer the ability to input USB power, which will bypass the battery. So if you have a larger capacity exterior battery, you can plug that straight into the camera. So tons of stuff, which I'm sure we'll get into, but both of these cameras are going to raise the bar big time over even the Z6 and Z7 in terms of its video capabilities. So,
can I be a little bit of a spoiler here too, that I understand IAF is now a part of video where it wasn't before?
That's huge because, you know, we've never really used autofocus before when recording on DSLRs. So that's kind of a huge leap forward, though. We've added IAF for both humans and animal in our other cameras by way of firmware, but these cameras will actually offer IAF for animals and humans in video as well, which is huge, very huge.
So I'm gonna turn to you, Kitty. Steve mentioned a lot of different things there. As a filmmaker, talk about the importance of all of this technology for you as a filmmaker and how you would adopt to using it.
Sure. So I'm very familiar with the original Z6. It's my main camera for my YouTube videos and my client work because I just love the image quality that comes out of that camera and how reliable it is. I never have to freak out if there's going to be a card corrupted or if it's glitching or if it freezes or overheating. Like, it's always working no matter like what temperature I'm at or how long I'm shooting on it. And I'm also really extra, so I use my Z6 for all my Zoom calls, especially this year, even with family. Like, I'm using it right now, and it makes everyone look like 480p, which is hilarious. So there wasn't really a big learning curve when it came to the Z6 II. And as far as build, I'm like a big fan. I love all the features, of course, but I'm a big fan of that grip because I just noticed that I gravitate towards cameras that I just enjoy holding. You know what I mean? It's like holding a hand that really fits with you. So I'm like holding hands with a camera, and it makes me go out and shoot more, and it keeps me inspired every single day, every time I pick it up.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Now, Chris, when Steve got into this N-Log and 12-bit and flux capacitor and 10 point whatever gigawatts of power these cameras have, talk a little bit about some of that technology for you as a filmmaker.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the biggest part that I love about using the Nikon mirrorless the system is the expandability. You know, I can expand into using a digital recorder to extend my recording time, to increase my bit rate, and to shoot longer, to shoot all day. And you know, those things are really helping me keep up with my professional clientele, my professional work. In addition, I can't talk more highly about having, you know, the duality of a stills camera and a video camera, and being able to use the same lenses for both my photo and video gig. I don't have to buy two different camera systems, and on top of it, I don't feel like they lack on either one. I feel like they're, you know, premier products for both, you know, photo and video. That's something that, you know, my career is built off of, is capturing stills in motion. So, you know, the fact that it does everything I need to do for both photo, video, it's great. It's the best of both worlds.
Thank you so much, Chris. And again, we had a chance to work together. So when we talk about your film, I'm sure we'll bring up some stories. But Steve, I want to take off on Z Nikkor. We've had a great build of lenses, many introductions throughout, and we talk about all this as this really rapid expansion of the Z mirrorless system, the Nikon Z mirrorless system. Can you talk a little bit about lenses? And guys, when you talk about your films, I want to talk about all the hardware and lenses used, but Steve, talk about the importance of the lenses and the mount and how the incredible image quality that we're generating here.
Yeah, as we know, the lens is the eye of your camera. I mean, the quality of the lenses has improved since going to the Z system by virtue of the Z mount. It's allowed our engineers to actually engineer in technology in these lenses that is specific to video. For instance, in our prime lenses and even in our zoom lenses, they have minimized the occasion of breathing, which occurs when a lens is not designed for video. When you change your focus from very near to very far or vice versa, your image size can change, and that's very disconcerting when you're shooting video. So those are things. Very quiet stepping motors are used. So if you choose to use autofocus, you don't have the noise, getting into your audio the way we would have, years ago. So and not to mention, of course, just the optical superiority of having this platform to design lenses around. We just recently introduced a 50 millimeter 1.2 lens, which is absolutely gorgeous. I haven't had a chance to really shoot with it. I've looked through it. It's truly amazing, as well as the new 14 to 24 f2.8, which is smaller and lighter and will be much easier to rig up. By the way, those are considerations that people shooting video have to consider, I think, a lot more than still photographers. Balance for putting it on a gimbal or putting it in a cage or in a larger camera rig setup. The lenses, though, are just remarkable, absolutely remarkable.
And, one of the things that, we talked about in the early sessions was all of the techie stuff, Steve. And, when we introduced the camera system, before we jump into these projects that Kitty and Chris were a part of, talk a little bit about the mount, the size of the mount, the importance of the size of the mount. Now, we also debuted the 58 millimeter 0.95 Noct, when the system was introduced. But you mentioned the 51.2, and that's critical because 1.2 can become a real sweet spot, along with the 1.8 series, along with the trinity of lenses at 2.8 now from 1424, 2470 to 7200. Talk about the importance of the size of the mount. And guys, again, grasp onto this technology because it's not as simple as, oh, it's all just great. Everything is engineered to be pristine when it comes to the precision of optics and quality. Talk about that, Steve.
Right. The mount itself, of course, is responsible for these kind of crazy apertures like a f0.95 58 millimeter Noct. I mean, that wouldn't have been possible on the existing f-bayonet mount, which is only 46.5 millimeters in diameter, but the new 55 millimeter Z mount with a very short flange back distance of only 16 millimeters allows our engineers to design lenses that can get light to the very far reaches of the image sensor, all the way to the corners of the image sensor. So we get a very sharp image from edge to edge, from center to edge. In addition to having the exceptional apertures that you see in lenses like the 51.2 we just recently introduced. So the mount is really the heart of this system more than anything else. And of course, the adaptability of over 360 different types of F-mount lenses by way of using the FTZ adapter makes the collection of Nikkor lenses available to Nikon Z camera users truly remarkable. I've collected lenses over the years. Some of them have totally different looks than our new lenses, but I can adapt those lenses to my Z camera bodies, which is really exciting. But when you look at the lenses that we've brought to market in the seemingly short, very fast 2 years that the Z system's been on the market, and with the expectation we're going to have a total of up to 24 lenses by the end of next year, or within next year, it's a very exciting time to be a part of the Z system for sure.
Let me go back to you, Kitty. Talk a little bit about the importance of lenses to you, the type of lenses you go to, not necessarily for this project alone, but what Steve said about Z Nikkor is so important, and then that versatility of using all the lenses. Where do you feel you go with the lenses, and what's important to you?
Well, personally for me, I shoot a lot on the 24 to 70. I'm on it right now, and I just feel like it's a really great focal length because it covers a lot of things that I need to get done. And especially when people are starting out, they always ask me, what lens should I get? What lens should I get? And I always suggest a good 24 to 70. Even the f4 does amazing. You don't have to get the 2.8. But like you said, like a lot of the lenses you guys have in this line open up really wide. I remember playing with the Nock lens at CES. That was like 0.95 aperture. It's insane. I was like focusing on the model's eyelashes even. It was just so crisp and so sharp. So I really want to play with that. Maybe, hopefully I could rent it or something and do a fun project on that. But I really enjoyed for the shoot was that new 14 to 24. It was amazing because I do a lot of gimbal movement shots, and just rebalancing with a zoom lens is really difficult when you change the focal length because it could like totally screw up everything. But this didn't change whatsoever. So balancing was easy even if I changed it. And I loved it. It was amazing because usually with like ultra wide lenses, they have that bulbous glass that you're always scared to scratch. This one wasn't jutting out so much. So I definitely need to get one of those.
Before I come back to you, Chris, Steve, talk about the genius behind the hoods for the 14 to 24 now. What are we capable of doing?
Well, because we've taken away that front sort of hemispherical front element on the 14 to 24, our engineers have been able to flatten that out significantly to the point where the lens actually comes with two different hoods. There's one that you can use just standard equipment on the lens itself, and the second hood actually accommodates 112 millimeter screw-in filters. We will make available a neutral color or neutral clear type protective filter in that size, and also a circular polarizer that can be attached to this secondary hood or the filter hood. And then of course there is a second lens cap that allows you to cover and protect that, to Kitty's point, so you don't have to worry about a large front element being exposed like that. Not only can you put a hood on it, but you can also put a filter on top of it and a dedicated lens cap. So it's an ingenious design. Oh, and if that weren't enough, the engineers actually built in a rear filter holder where you can actually cut your own roughly 40 millimeter Aten gelatin filter and put it in the back of the lens as well to for long-term color correction if you wanted to.
Yeah, my impression on that lens. Yeah, you look at that lens, you think heavy, and it's not. You mentioned before balance. Chris, before I get back to you, I want to remind you guys out there tuning in, if you got a question, go into the chat box below, write that question in. We got reps standing by to answer those questions. So Chris, talk to us about Nikkor and lenses, and how do you approach generally what you do in filmmaking with lenses?
Yeah, I mean, everything has to do with the quality of that lens and your lens selection. The FTZ adapter will allow me to, as Steve mentioned, use older lenses, f-mounted lenses. And, as a director, I may have a vision for something, and I can take a look at all my lenses and say, I want something that's a little more soft. I don't want to go super sharp. I want to go maybe something more dreamy. Maybe I'll pick out an old film lens, and I can adapt my old film lenses to my camera. I think to be able to have that option of optical options to go, through the entire spectrum of Nikon lenses basically, and attach it to your camera is beautiful. And again, when you're using the native glass, I always suggest for people to try the new Z lenses because, as you mentioned, it's ultra quiet when it's focusing in the autofocus. That was a big deal for, growing into where we are now is just that noise of the lens focusing and breathing. Now it's dead quiet. It doesn't affect your shots. It doesn't distract you. It's not something you got to worry about editing around. And it's ultra smooth. You have options to, speed up how fast you want that tracking or the tracking sensitivity for autofocus. So within just turning on a switch, you have options and parameters that you can really fine tune that autofocus to make it feel very natural. I still like using that 14 to 30 f4 lens for gimbal work because it is ultralight and it has the ability to do the screw-on filter without having, you know, that additional lens hood option. It just seems like if you're shooting outdoors, you're going to need an ND filter. You know, you need a light lens, one lens that's going to push from 14 to 30. That's a good variety. So on our film, we actually use that quite a bit, and we used a gimbal. We tried to move through a lot of different scenes as quickly as possible. So I had to make up my mind about, you know, how often we wanted to change the lenses, because when you go to change a lens on a gimbal, you know, you're asking, you know, for a lot of time for the camera to be down. But, you know, it's great to have so many lenses to choose that vision, that direction, and that all goes toward, you know, being able to share your story the way you want to tell it.
Beautiful.
Hey, Mike,
thank you, Chris, for that.
Can I chime
Yeah,
in?
Steve, I wanted to mention to you, though, I want to bring you back in.
Okay.
Talk about something, a new feature where you can reverse
Yep.
focus. Is that where you were going? Are we thinking on the same wavelength, dude? Talk to me here.
That's exactly where I was going to kind of dovetail what Chris was saying, though. But what's interesting, too, is that I always used to hear from people that I'd try and convince that they should try and use a Nikon to shoot video with. And they said, well, because we do so much manual focusing, yours is the only system that focuses backward of everyone else. So we've got a great new feature in Z6 and 2 and Z7 2 that allow you to actually reverse the direction of focus when you use manual focus on these cameras with Z lenses. So that's a really exciting, that's a great way for somebody who has been used to using dedicated cine lenses, or heaven forbid another manufacturer's lenses that focus the other way. Then we can now actually make that change. If someone chooses to use manual focus, they can reverse the direction of the focus ring on their Z Nikkor lenses with these two cameras. It's very, very cool.
So those of you tuning in, you know, you saw Chris light up and Kitty smile at certain things. We don't make it easy for these guys. So new product, it's under non-disclosure, you know, very, very tight security. We didn't give them a stitch of features when it came to these cameras. So I hope you guys are getting more and more impressed hearing some of the things that Steve is saying. But I'm going to start with you, Kitty, because let's talk about your project a little bit, and Chris will come back to you for yours. But you get a call from Nikon. We're not allowed to tell you anything. We need you to produce XXX. And where does your mind go as a filmmaker right there? Because I love for people out there to understand, what is Kitty thinking? How do you start to prepare in your brain? How do you come up with the film idea that you created, you know, the topic and subject matter? Let us in on what Kitty's thinking after she gets that call, outside of the fact that Nikon's nuts because we want it turned around in, you know, less than a week.
For sure. I feel like for a lot of filmmakers and creators, we do have ideas that we get inspiration from even before a project opportunity is presented to us. So even before the call, I was already inspired by some stories and some themes that I wanted to try. And I've already used Nikon Z6 for the past year now since it came out. So I already knew what kind of features you guys like to highlight and what the camera is good at. So it kind of just fit in with this theme that I wanted to do. And I feel like it really fit in with this whole 2020 situation as well. So that was my mindset beforehand.
So you produced something with a theme of rollerblading or roller skating, right? In a skate place. So maybe you had this idea before, and now we've given you the opportunity to jump into it. Do you have a title to this film, and where did this concept come from, and how are you starting to build it together to make it happen? Getting a crew together, getting, you know, the model or the subject, and then this, it's a great idea. I love the idea that, you know, we'll let people see it when we debut it, but talk about how you take it to the next steps.
Well, first of all, I want to thank everyone who worked on this project. It was a lot of fun because this is the first project that I've been on outside of just filming myself and YouTube and TikTok. So I really missed it since before quarantine. It's been a long time. So this kind of made me really happy to collaborate with multiple people and talented people again, and just made me feel like, oh, things will be okay and hopeful in the future. And we already know 2020 has just been a rough year for many people. And I just wanted to bring about this video that makes us a little bit more happy and brings us to a nostalgic time, and to motivate people to find that special thing that just makes them happy and feeling free, even if it's something really important. I think right now it's especially the time to reflect on that. And for example, for me, it's creating with talented people. And for my character, it was roller skating. And the character that I actually picked her name's Brittany. She's an amazing roller skater. And she's also a filmmaker who I wanted to collaborate for some time already. So this was like the perfect mix. And initially, I was really inspired by the BTS Dynamite music video. I don't know if you guys have seen it, but that concept is very retro and vibrant with colors. And I felt like it was very perfect for the Nikon Z6 II. And Nikon, in general, just has the best color science that I've seen out of camera. So for this video, we played with a lot of color, a lot of depth, and a lot of movement. And it was a very low lit place as well. So being able to shoot 120 frames per second with this camera, I knew it could perform with no noise issues. And I really love how it came out, and I'm excited to show you guys. It was a lot of fun to shoot.
You bring up something very important. I remember being in a section of the building, Steve, way back when all of this was coming to light, and in cameras and digital in general. And I, believe it or not, I used to sit next to one of Nikon's color scientists. Steve, this isn't just random, right? Talk a little bit about Xpeed 6 and the brains behind this before we jump into Kitty's movie. Because I think it's so important to talk about the processing in camera. Now, if I understand it correctly, we've got dual processing going, right?
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about that, Steve.
We do, by having two dual Xpeed processors. What a lot of people don't understand about Xpeed, it is not a part. It's not a widget. You know, it's not a thing you can hold in your hand other than the chip on which it's contained. But Xpeed represents everything Nikon engineers have learned about photography in general, not just digital photography, but everything. And the color science built in, to Kitty's point, is very important. But of course, we try and deliver as real a look as possible, but we also recognize that people must have customization. So in addition to the dual processors, of course, the benefit of the Z system, both for stills and for video, is that we offer a tremendous capability in adjusting each and every picture control that this camera is capable of. We've even included 20 creative picture controls that allow you to establish, you know, basically a look. If you like a bleached out look or a monochromatic look or a dark low key look or a high key look, those are all available to you with almost infinite adjustment too, to create just the look you like. But there's a lot to be said for the best color science, in that what our cameras deliver ultimately in the end is as good as it gets.
All right, Kitty, so back to you. We get a beautiful roller skating rink. You've got a beautiful model. Is there anything else you want to set up before we debut your film? Is there a title to this film yet?
I didn't even think of a title. So maybe if you guys want to help me think of a cool title, that'd be awesome.
We can leave it titleless. So folks out there, here's the debut of Kitty's short film. Katie, I absolutely love that. And I feel like it's a bit of a fantasy of all of ours to just turn into something when the day ends and having the whole roller skating rink to herself. I think that's phenomenal. So now I want to take you back to how this all comes together. Again, as a still photographer, I'm out photographing birds in flight at rapid sequences, or I'm shooting portraits at one frame at a time. How do you build all this together? So many cool shots there. Is your mind saying, I want to be the artist, or I'm really going to push the technology in the camera? And then your thoughts about the camera as it's in hand.
Yeah, so when you think about the story and shots, you have to think about both the tools you're using, the lenses you have, and how it fits into the story. So I had to storyboard everything out. I don't know if you noticed, there's like certain transitions. So you have to plan that before and ahead of time and make sure everything is seamless. So yeah, I wrote down like when I first start out, I like to write down all the shots that I plan because I'm more of a shooter. So I like to write those down first. And then I have a writer that helps me kind of formulate the story a little better, and if it flows and it fits into the time frame as well, and then we work together on that. And then I'll draw out a storyboard and send it to the crew, and so we're all on the same page. We'll have a meeting beforehand, and yeah, it was just a lot of fun because I toured the location beforehand. It was only like 5 minutes away from my house, luckily. It just happened to be the most perfect location, and Snoop Dogg had his birthday party there, and they did other music videos. And they're closed currently because of quarantine. So it was nice to give back to local business and pay them for like rental services of the place. But it's funny because this building is so old and they haven't really updated anything. So we weren't allowed to plug in any lights, and there wasn't AC. And it was during the time where there was like a heat wave in LA. And I was really concerned because we were running around with gimbals, and I was worried about the talent being sweaty, even though we had makeup and hair. But yeah, it was really hot, and the camera didn't overheat at all, even though we were shooting in 4K and behind the scenes and also 120, and there was no issues there. So it performed really well.
Beautiful. When you mentioned using the 1424 before and 2470, were there any other lenses that you used during the production?
Oh yes, I used the 50 to 1.2 for like the close-up shots of when she entered the roller rink and when her hand was on the railing, and they were crispy. They look so good.
Yeah, see, one of the first kids on the block to touch that 50 millimeter 1.2. You know, Steve, when we talk about all this amazing technology, Kitty, before we go to Steve, what did you shoot to card, or did you shoot to a Ninja? How did you capture the video?
Yeah, so I shot it on the XQD card because we're mostly mobile on gimbal, and I was just kind of running around in the space, and I wanted to definitely get as many shots as I could. So I shot it directly onto the card in neutral picture profile.
Gotcha. Steve, there are a number of profiles on the camera too. I think I remember it was you that was responsible for having the engineers push the whole flat profile. Talk about the profiles for video.
Well, if you're going to shoot 8-bit to the card and the camera, you can bake in a look basically. And of the picture controls that we had available, of course, once you bake that in, there's not a lot of opportunity for, heavy-handed color grading after the fact. But prior to having the real 10-bit output, and especially the raw output, our engineers actually devised a very flat picture control that would maximize the dynamic range of the sensor, even in an 8-bit internally recorded file, so that it could tolerate just a little more pushing and pulling in the grading process. The flat profile is great for quick in-camera recording, but of course, once you unlock the potential of not only N-Log but now HDR with HLG, which is really kind of great because it's operating in a much bigger bit space, so that there's more color, there's more contrast, there's the brights are brighter, and the HLG, or the hybrid log gamma, allows you to actually play that footage back even on existing SD and HD monitors to the extent that they can display that additional color and dynamic range. It's a really great way to sort of elevate your filmmaking. And then of course going all the way to raw video at 12-bit, of course, affords the more advanced filmmaker some pretty sophisticated color grading capabilities after the fact. So we offer everything from 8 to 10 to 12-bit recording, which is great, and it's been such a small footprint.
I want to remind the viewers out there, if you got any questions, go right into the chat box below. We've got some reps standing by to answer questions we may not be answering here. So Kitty, all in all, you get the camera in hand. We told you think Z6, right? That's the only thing we gave you and Brian, and said go to town. So camera comes into your hand, your first thoughts, and did it do what you needed it to do? And did it stand out, more than what you've been working with in the Z6? Did certain things stand out?
Yeah, I remember, I'm like, can you try to get some features out of him? Like, I don't know if I need to incorporate anything specific because I don't have any clue. And I was just reminding the crew that was working with us, I'm like, I don't know what it does still. So we're just going to have to like wing it and figure it out. And then as soon as we met up in the parking, I was like, what is it? Where are these features? Can I see it? I was just so excited to finally see what was going on. And Jeff, who is there with us, had it like written down on a piece of paper, and he's like, I'll show it to you, but I have to tear it up. Like everything's super confidential. So you guys are definitely good on the lockdown and keeping it a secret for all this time. But it did perform really well. I always enjoy shooting with Nikon, and I never have to worry about, even if it's a camera that I never used before, if it's going to mess up or bug out, there was no issues.
Beautiful. Well, thank you for sharing that, and thank you for letting us air your film, debut it here. I was fascinated. I love feel-good things, the color, low light, everything you talked about before. You hit it. I love the story. Mr. Hirschman, my
Hello.
good friend, Mr. Hirschman. Mr. Hirschman made me work 15-hour days back to back. I loved every minute of it because working with you was a gift to me. And we've worked together on other projects. But so, Chris, we come to you. Now, you are known for some of the commercial stuff that you've done. We know you for your rock videos that are phenomenal. But we kind of pushed you in a path that was a little bit different for you. So talk about what it was like when we gave you that phone call. And where did you take it from there as far as the creative goes?
Yeah, well, thank you so much. And Kitty, that was an amazing film, by the way. I remember skating there, visiting my friends last time I was in town in LA. Moonlight is like one of the coolest retro skating rinks ever. So when I saw that just now, I was very shocked and happy to see it. You know, I had a very similar experience where Nikon had asked me, you know, can you make a film, but just not a music video? Please, no more music videos. I said, okay, where do I go from here? Let's, you know, use this as an opportunity to do something new. And so I was determined to create a short film, something that had a narrative storyline to it. I knew from the beginning that I didn't want to use dialogue. I didn't want people to talk, and I didn't want to you know, use language. I wanted to communicate through body language, and I wanted to find a way to use just visuals to make it feel like there is some sort of storyline. You know, the day of our shoot, we had maybe a different idea of how we wanted the storyline to go, but you're given 2 days to do your best. And so my original story kind of changed on the spot, but that's what we're used to with as filmmakers, is improvising. But I still feel like it has a bit of a narrative, and it definitely feels like it is a story. When we watch it, we'll talk more about the technical aspect of it. But I decided to write kind of like a fantasy short film, and I wanted it to start off in a Victorian era, and I wanted people to think that that's where we're going to stay and hang out. And then I wanted to take us to a completely different either time period, just time and space. And that purpose was for us to be able to use different types of lighting and different textures and set pieces. I love building set pieces. As you can see behind, this is from our shoot that I drew up and gave to our art department to build, and now it sits in my basement. That's also the best part of a filmmaker, is you get to keep a lot of the props that you get commissioned to build. So I have a storage space in a basement full of fun little film props. But yeah, I'm gonna stop there. Maybe we'll show it and then I'll come back and kind of talk a little bit more about it.
You have a title to your video.
I don't have a title either. It's just titled Nikon Short Film as of now. So maybe we'll work on that as well. But yeah, it does not have a title.
Well, that's okay. Everybody out there, this has all been work in progress for all of us, and we've been moving pretty quickly to prepare for this launch day. So that's good. We'll build that. And maybe we'll call out there a contest. Each of you guys call out to your fans and say, what should I title this? I don't know. But
great.
Chris, let's debut your film. So excited to share this with everybody. I got to tell you, and I've been on quite a few video productions as Steve has, and it's amazing how both of you work and how it all comes together. And when you're on set, folks that are tuning in, you know, you see things maybe not shot in order. As Chris said, things change on the fly. But man, I got to tell you, a couple of times you had me freaky there because this kind of freaks you out a little bit. The Mylar room, we had some time in the Mylar room. But dig in a little bit more about the details of Chris, of how you put this together, some of the tools that you used, the lighting that you were working with, that you had on controllers that you could change. Give us some more insight. And by the way, folks, just know we got a very special treat at the end of this as we outro, as we leave this segment. Kitty did a behind the scenes video. Chris did a behind the scenes video. So everything they're talking about, you're going to get to see a bit of what happened on set through the BTS. They're both fabulous. And again, if you have any questions as we go through the remainder of this segment, the chat box below, we're probably still answering questions now, so throw a question out there if we haven't answered it. But Chris, take it away. You freaked me out a little bit here, but a great, great video.
Yeah, thank you so much. Well, I have to say that, you know, all of that is the effort of a lot of creative people putting their heads together and coming together toward a common goal to create that look and those visuals. As a director, I'm able to dream up these ideas and hand them to different departments, an art department, a lighting department, a costume department. And that was really fun for this film, for me to be able to feel like I'm on a feature film, and I'm working with all these department heads, and we still kept it as small as possible because of, the times that we're in right now. We practice social distancing, wore masks, and tried to keep the smallest crew possible. So we had about 14 people that were involved. And I think the story is about contrast. The story begins, with a totally different music. And by the way, all the music was put together as we edited it with a gentleman named Mike Regan out in California. So he would send us a pass, we would edit it, and then he would retime it. And as we would make edits, we just went back and forth from coast to coast to create this film, and we did it in 2 days. We filmed it in 2 days, and then we edited it in 2 days. And like I said, it's about contrast. I wanted to tell a story, but I'm also mindful that this is a piece that people will look at, and hopefully they can see a bit of their filmmaking techniques or their lighting techniques or their camera movement techniques within this as an example of what you can do with the camera. So it's very natural lit at the beginning. And then as the film progresses, it goes into darker, low light conditions. And then as we fly, through the middle and the climax, it gets so bold and punchy and colorful and, fast paced. I wanted it to just be completely opposite from where it started and kind of shock you and surprise you. And that's kind of the beauty of, I think, this project was it allowed me to tap into the things that I like, which are, kind of like fantasy films and sci-fi, and to do all of that on the smallest budget. There's no special effects here. You're looking at practical effects. Everything that we've done, we've built these things, or the lights moving on and off, the camera movements, everything is done in camera, and that's what I prefer to do as a filmmaker. And, this was just a dream to work on because it allowed us to play and be playful with our colors, and our actors were so awesome. Jean Carlos was our performer, and the guy's balancing upside down in a chair. It's just fun to watch, So again, I'm more of like a live performance, someone who captures, live performances with music. And this was an opportunity to capture a live performance through dance. And that's not something that I've done a lot, to be honest. So it was really fun to just build and choreograph a routine and, have our other actress, Becca, who was a part of this. She's a close friend of ours. And we just thought we had good chemistry and would be, a great compliment for each other. So, I think the film did really well in it showcasing what it could do. And very similar to Kitty, I didn't know what was really new on this camera. So it's not like we get these cameras with here's a full spec sheet of what's new. So my approach was to just treat it like it was a Z6. And, then I was, surprised and got to discover what was new with the Z6 II, and I saw all kinds of different things, like, again, the autofocus for a human face or for an animal's face. I thought that was really fun to discover that going through the menus. But I knew the real test was going to be when we took this into our post-editing process and we saw what we captured, because we had to capture a lot of scenes. There was 2 days, a lot of different sets. And I just needed to make sure we captured it correctly in the field. And we, did as best as we can to, edit these files. So like Steve said, these cameras have all kinds of capabilities for your workflow. If you want a simple workflow and you want to turn this project around real quick, you can shoot to card with your 8-bit And that's a very simple workflow. If you want to expand your workflow into 10-bit, you need to add a digital recorder. So we use the Ninja Atomos V, or the Atomos Ninja V recorder, and we took an HDMI feed from our camera into that recorder. And every shot you see, except for slow motion, was recorded that way. We chose 10-bit in log to shoot in because that's a format that I'm very familiar with. We want the highest quality, but I also wanted something that I felt comfortable to work with, and so I chose the 10-bit. And you know, when we went to go edit it, the color was bold and punchy. The low light scenes, you can see great detail in everything. You know, it requires more work in the post-editing process when you go to something like 10-bit and 12-bit, but that's, you know, what we were prepared to do. So we had the people there who were able to color grade and help me with, you know, that edit, and we got it put together in 2 days. I mean, a project shot that large for 2 days and then edited in 2 days. I felt like that was proof that it's a good workflow, that you can pull off great images. It's not a Hollywood production, but it looks beautiful. And again, I'm just hoping that filmmakers can look at this piece and identify something within their own filmmaking and say, oh, that's like something I want to shoot, or I've shot, and oh, okay, cool to know that it can do this in those scenarios.
Chris, mention the Z Nicors. I know you used the 2 to 500 with the FTZ for some of the long stuff. Talk about the Z Nicors you used during the shoot. Yeah,
there was a shot that I did a zoom with servo on the zoom instead of the follow focus on the 200 to 500 to shoot over their shoulder to look over to the balcony. That was the only F-mounted lens that we used. The rest of it was all shot on the 14 to 30 f4, and that's the native Z glass. And I believe we used a 35 millimeter 1.8 and the 24 to 70 2.8 when we needed some extra stops in the low light. So, you know, during the day we can run around with an f4 lens because we're putting an ND filter on anyways. We don't need all of that low light, which is a heavier lens. And when you're running on the beach with a gimbal, you know, you've already got that added recorder to it. You want to find a good lens that, and again, those scenes are filmed with autofocus. They grab onto the face and you see the yellow box that tracks around your subject's face, knowing that you are in focus. So you can confidently shoot, you know, without feeling like you have to be an inch away from the screen. You could just see that your subject's face is illuminated with that yellow outline and know that your subject's in focus and continue to shoot. So, you know, that's the great advantage of using the native glass, and these lenses worked great for autofocusing because we had a lot to shoot and we didn't want to, you know, sit there and pull focus and, you know, have to redo something because, you know, user error, basically. You know, we just leave it up to the camera and that helps us move through our production a lot quicker.
Oh, beautiful job, Chris. Kitty, I want to come back to you real quick on yours to talk about two things that Chris brought up. Your music choice, because the music fits perfectly for both of these videos. And did you play with autofocus at all? Did you let the camera kind of run on its own?
Oh yeah, for me, since I started on film, it's really hard for me to trust autofocus in general, especially when it first came out. But now I can confidently use it and know that it's going to nail it every time, even in low light. So the original Z6, I shot in the middle of the dark in this park, and I was shooting a fire dancer in slow-mo, and it was nailing focus there even. So yeah, I definitely can trust it now. And usually when I shoot like close-ups, I'll get manual focus or if there's like foreground, but that's about it. And the music choice, yeah, I wanted to go with like kind of a 70s retro vibe, something a little funky and fun. And it would have been, I wish I had more time to like have a composed song, but yeah, there was like several choices that I wanted to use, but this one I felt like fit perfectly.
Well, you guys both scored huge on these assignments. Again, we don't make it easy. We don't give you a lot of time to do it. We don't give you much information on the cameras to do it. As Chris mentioned, and I know Jeff mentioned the same thing on your shoot, Kitty, we were very responsible about working in the environment of COVID and social distancing. And, you know, Those things are all important too. But Steve, I want to bring you back in here as we wind down before we go to the BTS videos from Kitty and Chris. You and I have had this conversation before, and you've explained it adequately. You have a choice of a Z7 II or a choice of a Z6 II, and you've always said, you favor the Z6 because of the 1-to-1 pixel ratio. Talk a little bit about why Z6 II to those tuning in, and then we'll run the BTS videos.
Well, the beauty of the two choices that one has, they both shoot really high quality video, but if you're apt to shoot more video than you are still images, you don't really need the resolution of Z7 II. You got to get used to saying that now, Z7 II. But you don't need that excessive resolution unless a part of your workflow includes shooting a lot of very high resolution pictures. It's not to say the Z6 II can't shoot high resolution, but Z7 is double the resolution. So it also it's a lesser price. It's just you're paying extra for still features that a lot of video users wouldn't necessarily benefit from, and you can buy half another camera to put on set. So outside of the principal differences in resolution, ISO range, these cameras are basically the same. And by the time February rolls around and we offer 4K 60 in the Z6 II, there will be even more parity. But both cameras are capable of doing a great job, whether it's stills or video. But I think for a video dedicated person or a filmmaker, the Z6 is probably preferable for a couple of reasons, not the least of which is it's less expensive.
Well, thank you guys. This hour flew by. Again, those of you that are interested in behind the scenes, stick around. We're going to show Kitty and Chris's behind the scenes videos. Steve, thank you for your technical insight. Kitty, wonderful to see you through this technology. It's great to see you all. Thank you for everything you've done. Chris, thank you for everything you've done. If you tuned in, I hope we've inspired you in this part 2 of this wonderful day in launching the Nikon Z6 II and Z7 II. It's been very, very exciting. And, Steve, we know the Z6 won a ton of awards for its capability and quality, and I think it's going to be a huge success in the Z6 II as well with all the advantages and new features. So thank you guys for tuning in. We have definitely rapidly expanded this Z system, and there's only the future to come and so much more. So thank you guys for tuning in to this next chapter of Z. For Nikon, I'm Mike Corrado. We thank you, and we will see you soon.
Hey everyone, this is Kitty here, and we are in this amazing retro roller rink because we're going to be shooting on Nikon's newest camera. Let's go. I wanted to create a fun video to give us some escape from our current reality. So I gave it a retro theme with a lot of color, movement, and texture. We followed Brittany, who is our amazing skater, struggling through her work life until she finds that thing that makes her feel the most free and happy. Hopefully we all can find that. The Nikon was great because we shot in slow motion and low light, and it did really well, as always. I had no idea what it was gonna do or what features it had until today. So I found it had dual card slots. You could either use XQD, SD, or CF Express. You could back them up, or if you wanna do photos on one card and do video on another. It uses a new battery that's also compatible with the Nikon Z6. So I could interchange them if I wanna use the same batteries. And I love these batteries because they lasted the entire shoot day. I probably changed the behind the scenes camera maybe once in the whole span of 5 hours that we were shooting. Also, if you shoot a lot of time lapse, you can supply power through the USB-C while it's shooting. I find the colors look beautiful, so sometimes I'll just leave it as is without adjustments. But when I do need to color correct it, this picture profile makes it very easy to do so. Personally for me, I like to shoot on neutral because those colors are just looking so good, as you'll see in the art film. Also, it has 4K 30 frames, 1080, 120 frames per second. So I was shooting a lot of my stuff today on 120 because I wanted to test that slow motion in the low light with all those colors, and Brittany doing her amazing footwork and spins on the ring today, which was amazing. 4K 60 frames per second will be available later with a firmware upgrade. And lastly, for people who love autofocus, there is human eye and animal eye on video modes. Ooh, money. Another great thing when you set your autofocus settings, it's 2 clicks now. Through the quick menu system, there's an extra page with all the various autofocus settings there. And oh my God, we have every Nikon lens for this shoot, but my favorite was that new one, which is the 14 to 24 millimeter. Oh my Lord, yes. It's my favorite new lens. I'm a fan of really wide lenses. Normally when you have really ultra wide lenses, you have this very bulbous lens, which for me, I get really scared to scratch the lens or the glass because you can't really put a UV filter over it. This one didn't jut out as much. The 14 to 24 millimeter was a perfect pair for my gimbal setup. It wasn't too heavy. And also when you zoom in and out, it doesn't extend either. So balancing it on a gimbal, I didn't have to adjust for different focal lengths. Thank you, Nikon, for letting me play with your new camera gear, and the crew, Brittany, for being our amazing talent today, Erica for hair and makeup, Brian for behind the scenes, Josh for behind the scenes, and shout out to Moonlight Rollerway for letting us rent their place. It's probably my favorite location I've shot ever. Hopefully they open up soon from quarantine so you guys could go there and skate. All right, I'm gonna clean up all this mess now and charge all the batteries. You know how it goes. We'll see you on the next shoot. Bye. Done.
Hi, I'm Chris Hirschman, Nikon ambassador and filmmaker. I'm going to take you behind the scenes on my latest short film, shot entirely with the Nikon Z6 II. So the goal of this project was to use the Nikon Z6 II mirrorless camera for video. So I wrote a fantasy screenplay that involved these two characters interacting with each other without talking to each other. This forced us to use, different things like body language and dancing, along with dramatic lighting and camera angles, all to convey our message and mood. We're getting ready to shoot this really long hallway in the sequence with our performer. He's warming up right now, as you can see. As you can tell, it's pretty dark. This is a nighttime scene, and this is lit with these bulbs, and we have control of each one, and we're gonna have some real fun programming each light on and off to kind of play along with our actors. But this is really going to test out our low light capabilities. So the beginning of our film starts in a Victorian era. You could tell with the costumes and the decorations. And I wanted the viewer to think that that's where we were going to stay. And then the film jumps into a more futuristic era and a completely different mood. We use different lighting and textures. This whole story is about contrast. We're using a 14 to 30 f4 lens. This is going to give us some really wide perspective in a very small room. It'll be pretty interesting to do basically a 360 view all the way around this room. We're going to try to play with some different silhouettes. The thing that's unique about this shot is we've decided to turn our camera vertical. We're just trying to do something new, play with some new ideas. What we're doing now is we're doing this dolly shot where our talent sits on one end and our camera is fixed on this and they travel together. All right, and lights, react, okay, and move. Perfect. The Nikon Z6 II worked awesome through every scenario we put it through, whether we were tracking a subject in motion on a gimbal or shooting in very low light conditions. This camera just worked excellently. And cut. I'm so happy and so thrilled that Nikon has these mirrorless cameras that you can shoot high quality photo and video on using the same camera body and lenses to shoot both photo and video. That's the best of both worlds. I think this video is a great testament to just how well the camera features work on the Nikon Z6 II. So I hope you enjoyed the film as much as me and my friends enjoyed making it. Thank you.